The station sat at the edge of the plains like a weathered sentinel, its wooden beams sun-bleached and sagging under the relentless sky. Dust swirled across the platform, catching in the hair of travelers and settling in the hollows of their eyes. It was early morning, and the air smelled of hay, horse sweat, and faint gunpowder, residues of a world always on the edge. Clara Whitmore stood clutching her small trunk, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The train's whistle had faded into the distance, leaving her alone with the prairie stretching endlessly behind her. She had come west with hope in her heart, and a letter of promise from a man she'd never met. The idea of a new life had been thrilling on paper, but now, standing in the dust-choked air, she felt a weight that had nothing to do with luggage. Her stomach knotted. She wasn't sure she could go through with it. The thought of being married to a stranger in a lonely ranch miles from the nearest town made her chest tighten. Every step forward seemed heavier than the last. "Miss," a voice broke through the morning haze. It was rough, low, carrying the timbre of someone who had spent years under the sun and wind. Clara looked up to see a man leaning against a hitching post, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes, boots coated in prairie dust, and a horse impatiently stamping nearby. I'm not sure I should go," she admitted, almost whispering. The man tipped his hat. "Then let me help you leave." Clara blinked. The words were simple, but the offer carried weight. He was a stranger, yet somehow she felt she could trust him. His presence was steady, grounding, like the plains themselves. I can't just walk away. There's a man expecting me, a family," she stammered. "The West doesn't wait for expectations," he said quietly, his voice carrying the calm inevitability of the open range. "It takes what it wants, and sometimes it gives you the chance to make your own choices." She studied him, his weathered face, the faint scars along his jawline, the way his hand rested lightly on the reins. There was no malice in him, only certainty. "What's your name?" she asked. "Colton Hayes, and you are—" "Clara Whitmore." The silence between them stretched, heavy with wind and possibility. Then, without waiting for further words, Colton swung onto his horse. "If you're serious about leaving, you best move fast. The plains don't forgive hesitation." Clara took a deep breath, her chest tightening with fear and excitement. She hoisted her trunk onto the back of the horse, and with Colton leading, they left the station behind, the train's whistle a faint memory. As they rode, the landscape unfolded like a painting in sepia tones, rolling hills, dotted with hardy shrubs, herds of cattle grazing, and the occasional lonely ranch house with smoke curling from the chimney. Dust trailed behind their horses like ghosts, but the west was never empty. Shadows moved in the distance, men watching, waiting. Clara had no way of knowing that the very people she was fleeing, the ranchers' hired hands, the ones who would see her disappear as a slight against their boss, were tracking her. Their eyes burned with suspicion and intent, their horses' hooves a distant drumbeat against the dry earth. Colton sensed it, the subtle shift in the wind, the unnatural silence of the plains, the smell of danger in the air. He slowed the horse, scanning the horizon. "We've got company," he muttered. Clara's heart jumped. "Who are they?" "No one you'd want to meet. But don't worry. I know these lands better than most." As the sun climbed higher, the tension between them grew, not just from the looming threat, but from the strange, quiet intimacy of shared danger. Clara found herself drawn to Colton, the calm certainty of his presence anchoring her fears. And in those moments, the distance between hesitation and courage shrank. By late afternoon, they reached a small canyon, its red cliffs glowing in the dying light. Here Colton made camp, the horses tethered to sparse trees, a small fire crackling against the night chill. They shared silence, broken only by the crackle of flames and the occasional distant coyote's howl. Colton looked at her then, his eyes catching the firelight. "You made the choice to come with me." "That takes courage." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked away, out over the canyon. "I don't know if I made the right choice." He shrugged. "Sometimes the right choice isn't clear until later. What matters is that you chose it yourself." The night deepened, Stars shone like a million distant fires above them, indifferent to the dramas below. And in that vast wilderness, Clara realized that the West was not just a place, it was a test, a trial, a crucible, and she was only beginning. Dawn broke in muted golds over the horizon, spilling light across the dusty plains like molten honey. Clara stirred beside the fire, the warmth already fading with the chill of the morning wind. Her body ached from the long ride, and her mind buzzed with unease. The vast silence of the plains had a way of amplifying fear, every rustle and distant hoofbeat a potential threat. Colton was already awake, crouched by the campfire, brushing ashes from the horse's hooves. His silhouette, framed by the rising sun, radiated control, confidence, and a quiet menace to anyone who dared threaten them. Clara couldn't help but notice how his hands moved, precise, practiced, like a man who had lived his life on horseback and under threat. "Morning," she said softly, brushing the dust from her dress. Colton glanced at her, eyes narrowing as if weighing the horizon. "Morning. Sleep well?" I think so," she murmured, though the knots in her stomach hadn't loosened. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "We need to move. They'll be onto us soon. Whoever's tracking you, they don't miss much." Clara's pulse quickened. "I don't even know who they are. They're not friends, and they won't give a damn about who you are," Colton said. "Just that you disappeared from where they expected you to be." The open plains stretched endlessly around them, the wind carrying the scent of dry grass, horse sweat, and a distant storm brewing over the western hills. They mounted and rode, the horses' hooves kicking up clouds of dust that glittered in the morning sun. Every ridge and hollow seemed to hold secrets. Every shadow could conceal a danger. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind or the creak of saddles. Then on the horizon they saw movement, figures on horseback, their silhouettes jagged and purposeful against the golden light. "They found us," Colton muttered, his hand brushing against the grip of his revolver. He didn't reach for it yet. It was the way he moved, calm, deliberate, like a predator who knew the terrain better than its prey. Clara's heart thudded. "Can we outrun them?" Colton's lips curved slightly, a shadow of a grin. "Maybe, but running won't solve anything. We'll need a plan." He guided their horses into a narrow ravine, the walls rising like red cliffs on either side. Dust and rocks tumbled down as the pursuing riders came closer. Colton's mind raced through options. The terrain favored him if he could lure them into the canyon, where a sudden turn could throw off their pursuers. As the riders entered the ravine, the first man shouted, the sound bouncing off the cliffs like a gunshot. "There she is. Don't let her get away." Colton's eyes flicked to Clara. "Stay close. Keep low. Follow my lead." The next moments were a blur of dust, rock, and hooves pounding the earth. Clara clung to the saddle, heart in her throat, adrenaline surging with every narrow turn and sudden jolt. Colton's horse surged ahead, skimming rocks and dodging low-hanging branches. He was a master of the land, guiding them through impossible paths, while the pursuers struggled to keep pace. Finally, the ravine opened into a wide canyon, the terrain flattening but offering cover in the scattered boulders and dry riverbeds. Colton slowed the horse, allowing Clara to catch her breath. "You okay?" he asked, scanning the distant figures still trying to follow. Clara nodded, her chest heaving. I think so. Thank you. For helping me." He gave a small shrug, not meeting her eyes. "I told you. Sometimes the right choice is just choosing to survive." For a moment, the wind and dust carried only silence. Then a voice echoed from behind the boulders, a voice that made Clara's stomach drop. "Clara Whitmore!" It was a man's voice, harsh and commanding. The same one whose letter she had trusted, the one she thought she was running toward for safety. But now, hearing him in the wild expanse of the West, she realized his intentions were darker, more possessive than she had imagined. Colton's eyes hardened. "He's trouble. Stay behind me." The man emerged, flanked by two large riders. His eyes burned with certainty and the cold authority of someone used to getting what he wanted. Clara's mind raced. She had never felt fear like this. Not in letters, not in promises, not in polite society. But here, in the raw expanse of the West, fear was clarity. It showed you who could be trusted, who would stand by you, and who would take everything from you without hesitation. "You're not going anywhere," the man called, spurring his horse forward. Colton shifted, keeping his voice low but firm. "We'll see about that." The next hours were a tense dance of strategy, misdirection, and sheer grit. Colton led Clara through hidden trails, narrow passes, and rocky ridges. He forced the pursuers into positions where their speed was a liability, not an advantage. And through it all, Clara realized something she hadn't admitted before. She trusted him completely, not just with her safety, but with her life. And something more, an unspoken bond, fragile and unexpected, was forming in the shadows of danger. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the plains in deep reds and golds, Colton and Clara finally found temporary refuge in an abandoned homestead, its walls crumbling but sturdy enough to hide them from prying eyes. They dismounted, hands brushing, a silent acknowledgement of the trust between them. Inside, amidst broken furniture and dust, they shared water and meager rations. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she sipped, and Colton noticed, offering her a steadying glance. "You've got spirit," he said quietly, "and you're braver than you think." Clara looked down, cheeks flushing. I don't know what I'd do without you." Colton's jaw tightened. "You won't have to find out." But the night was long, and danger never rested. Outside, the plains whispered of pursuit, of shadows that would not relent, of choices that would test not just courage, but morality, loyalty, and love. Call to action and suspense hook. If you want to see whether Clara and Colton can outsmart the men, hunting her, and what secrets from her past might catch up with them, like, comment, and subscribe now. The next chapter will take you deeper into betrayal, moral dilemmas, and a choice that could change everything.